Welcome back, everyone. I am the Depressed Viewer, and this is Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 6. So this is my second time kind of going through this, particular session. I was so tilted that I felt like I wasn't doing too well on the recording. But I'm in a better mood now, so I'm going to go ahead and go into this. So, going into this match, I did lose twice, which means I deranked into Silver 2. So this match is in Silver 2, not Silver 1. Another key thing, I started these matches on Saturday evening. Well, that's more than enough time to unlock SP, Elwyn, and Freya. Obviously, I did only Freya. I'll talk more about SP Freya. Overall, I think she's doing a lot better now. I think her stats could be a bit tankier, to be honest, but her kit's a lot better, in my opinion. Some of her stuff is a little more awkward, but like I said, I'll go into that later. So as for my opponent here, they had a juggler, so I've already opened with banning it. I might have explained this already, but I'm probably going to stick with banning juggler first until I have something like Rose and CL to possibly counteract the AoE. In any case, let's go ahead and take a look at the rest of it. No Landius in this setup, but they do have an Albedo. I don't know how strong she is. Mostly AoE, it looks like. There's some single targets, but most of it, the main brunt of this is AoE with one assassin. Oh, they do have a Landius. It's right there. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive right in. They banned my Estelle first. That's not too out there. So for some reason, they think I actually do things like rush downs, which I can't. My kit doesn't really work that well with it. They picked their Albedo as their main tank, not Landius, which is a little surprising. I went ahead and banned their assassins and their physical AoE. I take my Albedo. They banned some of my healers and AoE. And go straight for Rachel. I was like, okie dokie. I'm gonna ban more of your AoE. And I go ahead and at this point, since they were already banning my healers, I went ahead and grabbed Sophia. That will ensure I have a healer and some buff support. They actually take out my young Jessica, so I was like, okay. They banned my Arian Rod. I've only been able to use Arian Rod once ever, and I didn't use her very well. And my opponent went for a second tank, grabbed Landius. So I was like, okay. So looking at what's remaining in the box, the only single target strikers they have is Delit and Luna. I'm not too worried about Luna. She's either going to be Archer, which is not a big deal, or she's going to be a Flyer, and I have Albedo, and she's immune to the heal negation. Delit is probably the bigger problem, so I'll probably try to ban her, but not yet apparently. Yeah, I think I went ahead and banned. I'm not sure why I banned Luna. Well, I think I banned Luna ahead of time just in case they pick someone with that they can give legs to. But looking at the box, there's really not anything that's a big deal. And since I wasn't going Magic in the first place, I could have safely left Luna in there. I should have been like Lestel and Delit, I think. Or if I really just did not want to deal with AoE, I can get rid of Bozel. But to be honest, with how the kit's looking right now, and they left me with assassins, I'm actually okay with them with the squishy caster types. Speaking of, I grabbed Zerida. They banned some of my legs, which is fine. They picked Bozel. So at this point, I went ahead and just banned two of the healers that I didn't want to deal with. I was completely fine with. I was actually okay with them having a Delit at this point because I was like, it's kind of their only healer. And Delit's not exactly a good primary healer in most cases. I went ahead and grabbed Angelina to make sure I have... Because with this setup, as long as I can knock the tanks in a certain way, I can definitely kill one of the casters here with Angelina's Ram attack. They banned some more... I actually have a decent amount of mobility left over. So they went ahead to Chloe. I was like, perfect. I went ahead and grabbed Charlinka because they left me with it. So 3 assassins, essentially. I mean, technically Angelina is not an assassin, but she does the job. Alright, so let me go ahead and set things up here. Let me reduce the ×2 speed, switch to on animations. Okay, so nothing too special about Landius. He does have his 3 cost, which means he's immune to knockback. So I have to keep that in mind when I start pushing things around. This Albedo is standard kit with Blackguard Aegis. Looking at it, 15%. Okay, this one is actually a 4-star Albedo, which isn't the end of the world, but she being 4 stars means lower stats and not as much damage reduction. That's pretty much the gist of it. Yeah, and a little less counterattack damage. Okay, good to know. Chloe here is full heal. Bozel here is AoE with a faction buff, self buff. Rachel here is all AoE all the time with her. Didn't take her unique 2-cost AoE. What was it? Arcane Blast, I think it's called, or something along those lines. She didn't take that. She took Demolish. I'm guessing she was just hoping to like dispel if anything happened to live. But really, the big issue here is the Runic Void. The Lightning Strike is just kind of there. All right. Also, I didn't really go over my kit, but at this point, you guys, if you've been watching these, which I don't know why, you should know this kit for the most part. I don't really change much up on Albedo. Some things I should probably consider changing up on Albedo sometimes is switching from Crystal Molders to Phalanx, because she actually has access to Phalanx, which is really good against physical attacks. Crystal Molders are usually better against magic, but obviously I'm going against magic, so that's why I didn't switch. And sometimes I swap out Blackguard Aegis, but as you can see, I have the same kit here. Angelina has the same kit. It's all about mobility and getting the ram attack in. Zerida is 3-cost skill with faction buff and backstab. Sophie is all heals, and Shalinka is the same kit as always, with Skeleton Knights. Alright, let's dive right in. So really the main thing here is counting the steps, as always. There's a slight danger of Chloe having something like a tenuous headdress or whatever, and possibly giving like +3 mobility at this point. If that happens, there's not much I can do about it. It's just RNG going against me, which tends to be kind of the theme, as I mentioned before in some of these matches. But measuring out the distance, I'm outside of Demolish range. I am within Runic Void range. Runic Void goes 5 spaces from point blank range, so it goes all the way to here. So keeping that in mind, that's why I kept Sophia back a bit and went ahead and buffed Albedo. Alright, so at this point I do have enough to trigger an extra action with Angelina here. I can get to here with Tidal Surge. I can AoE here, hitting all 3 of them. It will not push back Landius, but it will push back both Albedo and Rachel. So this position is actually kind of good, is rather good, because it ensures the tank sticks with everyone else. And since Albedo is already guarded, Rachel wouldn't be pushed back because it'll just run into Chloe. So literally, the tank would get pushed to here and be protecting all the casters. So right now, I can't do anything with Angelina. I went pretty aggressive here. Yeah, I went super aggressive here. So I teleported in. That puts me in range of Landius. It also technically puts me in range of Rachel's Runic Void. I was pretty much betting on Landius not being able to one-shot Shalinka, which is a pretty safe bet, especially with Skeleton Knights. Skeleton Knights are super tanky, and they get a huge amount of extra defense when they're not fighting its holy units and demons. So I tried to get as close as I safely could, because I still wasn't sure what Bozel was going to do and other nonsense. But from here, even with the extra mobility from Fleeting Flash, I don't really have any good targets. I mean, I can attack either Albedo or Landius, both of which can tank even a hit directly to the general. Well, they'll tank it. Pretty much, if they have around 700, 800 defense and decent HP, that Shalinka just doesn't do enough damage, unfortunately. But low defense, she can definitely rock house. Alright, so I moved in with faction buff, which of course faction buffs Albedo. I went ahead and moved in and got my faction buff up and running. Alright, so this actually, that move is what gave me the opportunity, because what I can do now, instead of going all the way up to here and, you know, hitting multiple targets and all that nonsense, I can actually shift to here and do a 3-box AoE here. It will hit all 3 of these targets. These 2 will bump into Bozel and won't be pushed back, and Landius is immune to pushback, which obviously that will not change the formation at all, but right now, Rachel is not in guard range. Albeto's covering Chloe and Bozel. Landius does not have guard buff, he went faction buff first. So I can actually trigger an act again and then go straight for Rachel. Assuming Rachel's not immune to fixed damage, which doesn't seem to be the case, because she doesn't have, at least, unless she's going with an SR item, she's not immune to fixed damage. So we're gonna go ahead and move in. Do our AoE. Both the tanks are immune to stun. So we'll move in. Anticipation did fixed damage, which will reduce the sorceress's defenses. And there you go. So with the 2 tank setup that my opponent has and a healer, they only have 2 real damage healers, and I just took out one of them. So all I have to do is take out Bozel and I'm good to go. And for some reason they moved up with Landius, which gave me a clear path to go ahead and assassinate the other one. So at this point I've killed both their main DPS, so they only have 2 tanks and a healer. Albedo tried to capitalize here, almost got it, but not quite enough. If she was 5 stars, that probably would have been enough. So I was actually planning on attacking Landius, but I completely forgot about Albedo's guard there, so that was a bit sloppy on my part. What's kind of interesting about Impure Desire, its cooldown gets sped up if there's any debuffs, and that includes like passives, like auras. So this move again debuff is actually triggering Impure Desire, essentially for free. So pretty good stuff. Anyway, at this position I actually have no danger, so I went ahead and transformed. And went ahead and did rewind to kind of get everyone refreshed. The only person that's not in guard range right now is Angelina, but she's at full health and she has last rites. So I went ahead and took this opportunity to go ahead and finish off Chloe. Does Killing Blow with no troops, bypasses guard. It also attacks General directly, which is what makes it good. And at this point I'm just like, alright, well, my opponent actually kept fighting for a little while longer, as you can see. But 2 tanks and not really any way of healing. And I'm controlling the center at this point. Yeah, so the center's here. I'm controlling 5 out of the 6 tiles. And my opponent has no way of killing me. So at this point my opponent gives up. So this one was kind of decided on the ban pick phase. He went really heavy on tanks and let me have assassins, which completely nullify his tanks. Alright, so that previous win got me back up to Silver 1. I lost 2 more times, I went back to Silver 2. So once again, this match is in Silver 2. I'll talk a little bit about my defeats. There was actually an interesting box. Unfortunately, it's not really worth showing off because the match itself was very one-sided. But they had things like, they had characters like Chris and Anna, of all things. They actually had an R rank, or R rarity unit, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, I was kind of pissed off because literally the opening move with Anna, or with their Anna, which had a tenuous headdress, was gave +3 movement to their Illustrial, and it was in the moat map, the one that has the river running through the middle of it. And those, of course, those are the mountains up in the top and the bottom. So with +3 movement, Illustrial just kind of covered the entire map. I was really kind of pissed off because it's that situation. Like you can always say like the RNG, you have like that perception bias, but it says something when all the bad luck seems to always happen on the first round, which seems to be the case for me. It's always like, oh, if there's a clock, it's going to proc on the first spell cast. That way they can follow up on the next round and kill me. Or if it's a tenuous headdress, on the first round they're going to get +3 movement on their primary assassin killer unit or AoE unit and just rush me. I was pretty tilted here, and in this match I'm going to get tilted even more. So my opponent went ahead and opened with banning my Albedo. Taking a look at the box here. So I believe that's Florentia. So Florentia is another healer type. You don't honestly, you don't see her too often in the meta right now because she tends to her strategies can only be refreshed either with her 3-cost skills, killing units, or having a faction buff active. Unfortunately, with her factions, she doesn't really work too well. The only faction buffer that goes with Florentia is Ares right now, and in her other faction, Strategic, which is honestly not really in the meta right now. Eventually, a new faction buffer for the faction that Ares is in, I believe it's Reincarnation, will eventually come out, and that's when Florentia is really going to shine. Anyway, give me one moment. Alright, sorry about that. Anyway, so one of the things my opponent also has is a SP Elwyn. I did fight against an SP Elwyn in a different match, and I actually killed it. Unfortunately, Rian was a thing, and he kind of AoE'd me to the ground, and I believe he got a clock proc too. So yeah, pretty much the only way I'm going to be... If my opponent goes leaning on heavy on AoE, I have to probably go take double healers. That's kind of the only way I can counter it until I get Rosen CL. And even with Rosen CL, I might still have to take double healers. Anyway. Oh, actually, there's actually Florentia's other faction, I believe is Empire. Which, unfortunately, Empire is not in the meta either. You don't usually use Bernhardt, and you don't usually use Bernhardt, and if you use Leon, you're not using him for faction buff. And if you're using Rosen CL, you usually don't use her faction buff too often either. Anyway, so enough about Florentia. So my opponent does have a juggler, so I'm going to ban that first, as always. We got Rian, Arian Rod, technically Ares, Lycoris, Bozel, and technically Florentia does have an AoE as well, so that's 6 AoE characters. And then he also has a decent amount of strikers. He doesn't really have any quote-unquote guard bypassing assassins. I think Sophia might be able to get a guard bypass, but I don't remember. But in any case, some strikers. Sonya here. I think I called her Sophia. I apologize. Sonya, SP Elwyn, of course. We got Yusuke here. We got Claret. So yeah, it's a good mix of just AoE and just death. Looking at this box, I was not sure what I was going to do. I banned their juggler because I had to get rid of it. Since I banned my ability Albedo, I did pick Freya. I think this will be my second match ever using her. My first match went reasonably okay, I think, with her, but I still messed up a lot. They took Landius. I went ahead and banned Rian and Ares. When it comes to AoE, I'd rather take magical than physical, if I could possibly get away with it. I took Rosalia, mainly because I wanted a decent attacker with some legs. And since my opponent doesn't have Rosen CL, I can do things like use my 3-cost skill to go straight for the Landius and not worry about counterattack damage. So even though there's swamp in the middle and mountains above, and a lot of water, I was pretty confident that I can get Rosalia to at least get to where I need her to go. They banned more of my mobility and AoE. And they picked Lycoris. I was like, okay. So they already got one of their AoEs. I went ahead and banned Bozel, so that way if they want to buff Lycoris, they're going to have to bring somebody else, or use her own. And I wanted to go ahead and get rid of Yusuke. If I was using Albedo, I wouldn't worry about Yusuke, but SP Freya does not have anti-heal immunity, and Yusuke's anti-heal can't be cleansed away. Same thing for Elwyn's, so I'm definitely a bit concerned about Elwyn. I took Sherlinka, because I need somebody that could bypass guard at this point. Because I need to be able to kill that AoE character. If I can't, it's game over. They banned more of my support characters, essentially, and guards. They went ahead and took a... wow. They took Leona, sorry. Too many L names in this game. Leona as player 2 is actually rather powerful, I believe, simply because she can safely do act again without giving up turn advantage. So I went ahead and got rid of their main strikers, because I was not confident that my SP Freya could survive against Claret's Double Strike. SP Freya's health and defense went down a little bit. Her magic defense went way up. Technically, her attack went up some, though that's kind of irrelevant. So her tankiness is a little bit more universal, but it's not as she's not the physical powerhouse that she used to be, or juggernaut, I guess is a better term. Anyway, I needed a healer, so I took Sophia. I also need someone that can actually buff. So that left me with essentially Liana and young Jessica, which actually worked out really good for me because I wanted the long range spellcaster here. They took Arian Rod, and I haven't ridden into her Arian Rod too much recently because I usually try to get rid of her because she is a pain. Because she has her own act again mechanics, and she does physical AoE. She also has ways to put bubbles on herself to negate damage. It's just a huge pain. Went ahead and got rid of any additional legs, and got rid of their AoE, so that leaves them with essentially another healer support, or they can take Sonya, which they take Sonya, and I of course take my young Jessica here. Okay. Sorry about that, there was a lot of stuff to talk about. Anyway, so here's Freya. So SP Freya, essentially her talent gets replaced with a new one. She now actually has damage reduction as part of her kit, which is something that most tanks have. This actually helps quite a bit, especially if she gets access to new troops. I believe they're called Redeemers, which are our holy troop that can self-res if you have no debuffs on you. I'm not using Redeemers because I don't have them. I have them fully buffed, but I don't actually have a lot of defense training done. I haven't done all my defensive training yet on the holy branch because usually you don't tank with holy. So there's still a lot. Phalanx I have fully trained. There's only one training thing I haven't done yet, which is the new one that came out. So honestly, my Phalanxes just do much better. Anyway, a neat thing about Blossoming Rose. So Freya's previous talent only would trigger if you were at a certain HP value. Blossoming Rose will always trigger. The thing she gave up, though, is her old talent actually had technically infinite range. So anything that attacked her, whether it was ranged or not, would trigger it as long as she wasn't too low on HP. Blossoming Rose only works within a 2-block range, and it's based off her current position, not the position that she's guarding at. So if she shifts upwards from a diagonal guard or something like that, she will actually not proc Blossoming Rose, which is a little awkward. But a neat thing about Blossoming Rose is if any damage, it's anytime before damage is done. Doesn't have to be an attack. It can actually trigger off of AoEs. So if the person that's doing the AoE is within 2 blocks of Freya, it would actually trigger Blossoming Rose. Now, granted, usually your AoEs stay pretty far back, but it's kind of a neat little thing. It will actually trigger off of things like the small AoE wind attack that you can do with flyers usually. It will actually trigger off of that as well. It's kind of neat. It's also based off defense and M defense ×1, which is actually a little bit weaker than her pure defense talent based one. But the other catch is if this fixed damage is done to mixed forces, in other words, their soldier type is different from their primary type, like for example, sorcerer, mages, and holy, those don't match, it will actually bypass immunity, which is kind of cool. Besides that, she gets access to the new troops, which is Redeemers, and then she gets 2 new skills. She gets Rose Lash, but I'll do Crystal Spike first. Crystal Spike is essentially Barb, but more based off her SP stuff. So it does fixed damage after, let's see, when forced into battle. It'll do, yeah, when forced into battle, and I think it does it after battle, to be honest, but it does defense plus M defense ×1, and if they're formed in mixed forces, it bypasses. Rose Lash does very similar to, I can't remember the tanking skill, unfortunately, but essentially it will actually add a passive Crystal Spike buff, which means you can actually trigger it twice. It's kind of similar to how Barb work with like Spear Phalanx or whatever it's called. But the neat thing about this Rose Lash is it guards against both physical and magic, and technically activating it is an AoE skill. It actually is it's a 6-range line skill, so it goes all the way up to here from where she's at. It does only a little bit of damage, but it follows up with some fixed damage that can also bypass. And then once she activates it, whether or not, it doesn't matter if she hits or not, it makes her guard range 2 and adds Crystal Spike essentially. So pretty good stuff. So obviously I have her 2 new skills, and then I have Power of Hope. So now she's actually really flexible on tanking. I don't have to take 2 tank skills to guard against magic and physical. And this form of guarding against magic doesn't freaking, you know, destroy her defenses, which is good. Anyway, so that was Freya. Nothing too special with everyone else. Young Jessica is all single target. Srilanka is Srilanka. Rosalia is Rosalia. And Sophia is Sophia. Let's go ahead and go over our opponents. Lycoris went self buff, transformation, and her 3-cost skill. So if you actually intend on using Lycoris as an AoEer, this is risky because her Dark Despair has a 5-turn cooldown. So more than likely my opponent is betting on getting a clock proc, because clock will reduce cooldown by 5, and then she can just cast it over and over again. So this is a pretty ballsy thing. This is my opponent telling me that RNG is on his side. And since I got rid of Bozal, she has to buff. If she wants any sort of buff, she'll have to use Force of Darkness. Anyway, Sonya here, rather squishy. Like she has less than 7k HP, which is insane. Like all my other units, I'm assuming Sonya here is bait. Like I think that's purely what she is, but she's actually really annoying bait because she has Ninjutsu and Strike. So she can run anywhere she wants, ignoring terrain, and pretty much covered majority of the map here. And then she had her 3-cost attack is 2 range, so she has a lot of coverage, and with Bone Dinos, she can actually do quite a bit of damage. Alright, and also another thing to note, Lycoris's Force of Darkness faction buff will actually increase damage based off the cooldown timer of a skill. So it does, I think, 3%? Yeah, 3% for each one turn, so Dark Despair would do an additional 15%. Same thing here with Chaos Helix, it would actually do an additional 15% damage. Arian Rod, AoE with Total Destruction, so a little bit of push around if necessary. Also went with Zealots, so she purposely wants her troops dead so she can actually trigger her act again. If she gets below 70 HP, I believe it triggers it. Yeah. Landius is standard, and Liana here went no AoE heals and just took Gospel. Alright, let's dive right in. I was really concerned about the AoEs and act agains, but me staying at the boat would just kill me slowly, so I went and just pushed aggressively and got my transformation up. I'm gonna go ahead and open with a faction buff first. I was a little concerned about Sonya here, because right now I don't exactly have. Sorry about the frame rate. Anyway, right now Freya's guard buff is not up, so she only has 1 guard range. So right now Srilanka is not in guard range, and Sonya could probably get a kill off if she could get past the Skeleton Knights. But I went ahead and took that risk because if my opponent wastes to act again on Sonya, I would then kill Sonya with Young Jessica. So yeah, pretty much that. And I went ahead and went in this particular spot because it was the only spot I can get to that actually can reach somebody. Everywhere else was kind of not safe, to be honest. Yeah, and I just need, even though Sonya was definitely kind of bait and not the real threat, her mobility is just too big of an issue. I needed to go ahead and deal with her. Went ahead and moved in just so I can buff Srilanka. Okay. And kind of spread out just to hopefully avoid some of the AoE nonsense. I went ahead and moved in here. I'm going to take out Sonya. Sonya is cavalry, but I'm attacking directly and she's super squishy. I'm outside of guard range, but my opponent's not going to try to... Srilanka could take a hit. I went ahead and took this opportunity to go ahead and get guard coverage. I just did an AoE, I wasn't concerned about hitting. And then here's Dark Despair. Hits, and clock proc. Like, it's one thing for clock to proc every once in a while, but it's always in the beginning. Always. It's always in the beginning. Anyway, I went ahead and healed because I needed to. Obviously, the big issue now is I need to deal with Arian Rod. and Lycoris got clock proc, which means Dark Despair is up and running again. Like literally, if it didn't proc, I would not have to worry about Lycoris at all for at least several rounds. But 30% chance. All right. So I went ahead and took this opportunity to go ahead and attack at range, because thankfully max range means I'm doing tons of extra damage. Not quite a kill, but still did plenty of damage. Alright, act again. You could probably guess what my opponent's going to be doing. Probably her 3-cost skill. So I went ahead and moved in. Chivalry will make me immune to debuffs and kind of heal passively against the terrain damage here. Throw out some swords. My plan here was just to kill Landius, or at least get one kill off of him. I got the debuff on him, so he is not going to counterattack here. Okay. And then I'll heal, take some damage, and all that good stuff. Alright. Blossoming Rose procced. Thankfully it didn't do enough damage to actually get her to act again range. So Grand Cross. She also has murder, that special axe that does fixed damage, and she got a clock proc. Now Grand Cross is 6 turns, so it only removes 5, so it's still on 1 turn of cooldown. But once she gets, she'll just do another different AOE, and then next turn do Grand Cross instead. So that's 2 clock procs in a row, just letting you know, if you're keeping score. Yeah, honestly this fight is only difficult because both their AoEs got clock procs. If they hadn't, I would at least be able to survive a lot better here. In any case, since my opponent focused purely on offense here, their Landius is vulnerable. I need to get rid of the tank here. So, and my young Jessica is going to die from the next AoE anyway. So I went ahead and did Fireball. Kill him from range. She actually healed a bunch, but it may not be enough. Here's the next Dark Despair because of clock proc. Okay, no clock proc that time. Went ahead and use Rewind to go ahead and heal up because obviously Arian Rod is prepped to do another AoE here. Here it comes. Okay. Clock proc again, so that's technically 3 out of 4 right now. Went ahead and did some damage here. Nothing too serious. So they decided to go ahead and heal here. I can't actually reach Lycoris with Rosalia right now. I went ahead and attacked just to go ahead and do some damage and go ahead and proc Eternal Loneliness. This will get her back to full hit points and good to go. So yeah, I actually couldn't get in range here. Not much I could do about it, but since Leona didn't heal herself, her Shrine Maidens are down, which means I can go ahead and finish her off with this. So even at low hit points, I do enough damage to easily kill a squishy. And then I'll heal from Sword of Protection, because I have 3 stacks of my buff. Alright, so Lycoris doesn't have any attack skills anymore, thankfully because she didn't clock proc a second time. And I went ahead and used this opportunity to go ahead and attack Lycoris. This was probably... So, Lycoris was pretty much unable to do anything. Because like I mentioned before, her only offensive skill has a 5-turn cooldown, so if clock does not proc, it's 5 turns where she can only do nothing but faction buff, and that's it. That being said, at this point, Arian Rod's Grand Cross is off cooldown, and even if I took down attacked her right now, she has Physical Barrier up, so I will do practically no damage. I'll break the shield, then she would do... Well, she couldn't get the Physical Barrier back, but with counterattack damage and all that nonsense, it's a good chance that I would have not won the trade anyway, so I might as well just capitalize on what I could have done and just deal with Arian Rod by herself. So, Blossoming Rose, here comes Grand Cross. Does so much damage. Luckily, so my Sophia is actually immune to fixed damage. Went ahead and just AoE healed and hope for the best. I actually got a passive heal thanks to Tenyo's headdress. I went ahead and attacked just to break the bubble. Oh, also, I forgot to mention clock proc. she did clock proc again. And she's going to go ahead and use this opportunity to do total destruction. She's going to get an extra action because her HP is low enough. And then since she clock proc earlier with the other Grand Cross, she's going to Grand Cross again. As you can see, this is ridiculous. This is so much RNG in their favor. You can't plan for this. There's literally no planning for this. It's like, okay, my opponent can just spam their best AoE over and over again. Thankfully, it didn't proc again, so it's currently down. Went ahead and did a ranged attack to break the bubble. Thankfully, Skeleton Knights can heal up from, they can resurrect themselves. As you can see, it's close. Like, I don't have any heals left. I went ahead and took this opportunity to do Rose Slash to do some extra damage. And then I'll finish her off with this. Wind Wall did proc, but it's sword against spears at this point. But yeah, this, like, after this match, I wasn't even happy about it. I was just pissed. Because, like, I won, sure. But it was, like, the only reason it was difficult was because my opponent procced about, I think it was 5 out of 8 spells. That from characters that can actually do clock procs, I think they did 5 out of 8. I didn't keep track towards the end, but the big issue is a lot of them triggered at the beginning in a row, and there was not much I could do about it. So yeah, it was rough. You could barely see the damages, but yeah, my opponent did over 130,000 more damage to me, just simply because he was just wrecking me with a bunch of AoE. So yeah, sorry if this one was a bit long and long-winded, but yeah, this after this match, this does get me back up to Silver 1, and I was just like, I'm not even sure if I can get Gold 3 this weekend. This is rough. Anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and call it here. I'm the Depressed Dealer. This was Langrisser Mobile Apex Season 6. See you guys next time.